Afternoon, Leslie Johnson, Deputy County Manager.
Good afternoon, Michael Bryant, Deputy County Manager.
Good afternoon, Derek Ramos, Deputy County Manager and Chief of Staff.
Good afternoon, Adrian Cox, Budget Director.
All right, now can we stand for our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We've got 3 items on our agenda today, and hopefully we'll manage our time such that we won't need to extend it. But before we get into our meeting, I wanted to take a moment to share with you about something that some of you may or may not have heard. Typically, I would send you an email telling you something's going on. I did not have time to do that, but I did want to mention to you that there was some discussion at City Council meeting last night about a letter that I sent to the manager and to the mayor. And so I wanted to tell you how that came about and what it was about. Apparently, City Council members were having a discussion about consolidation. And we had staff people in their meeting. Now, I found it interesting that they accused the mayor of having a conversation with me and some kind of backdoor deal or back channel conversations, but I haven't spoken to the mayor about this. This information was public, it was in their meeting, and the information came to me that they were discussing consolidation. And of course, that would raise my concern because this board has never had a conversation about consolidation, and we would not have a conversation about consolidation without at least talking to our 6 towns. So I was incensed at the fact that there was this conversation going on about consolidation. And so subsequent to that, I did have a conversation with Councilmember Braxton Winston, who is the co-chair of the consolidation meeting. And I thought we had a very good conversation. I made it clear to him that we don't have anything to do with the city's process. However, there's a different process before something like that comes before our committee. It comes first through the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and then a recommendation to this body so that we can put it on our agenda, and then we'll have the discussion. I did have a conversation with our Intergovernmental Committee chairperson, who indicated to me that he had had casual conversation with these city council members, but nothing formal, nothing to the point that it would even get to the level of being a part of their committee meeting. So I wanted to clarify that in case you heard that, so that everybody will know what took place. All right. With that being said, we'll move directly into our agenda. And at this time, I am going to call upon the Sheriff of Mecklenburg County. Do I turn to my manager first?
No, I think you can go directly to Sheriff McFadden.
All right. Sheriff Garry McFadden.
Thank you all. Before I start, I would like to take a personal privilege, if you mind, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Today is International Women's Day, and these are my women who run my detention center and Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. Most people don't know this, but I'm proud to say that my chief and their majors are my sole backbone at the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. When I speak nationally, it is very hard for me to say that my entire jail system, detention as we call it, is run by women. By Chief White, who runs the entire detention center. You have Major Youngblood and Major DeLeon Brown, who runs the centers. Major Youngblood runs the juvenile, Major DeLeon Brown runs the juvenile, adult, and my arrest processing is ran by Major Henry. So we represented them today, we honored them today, and just want you all to understand that my center is a little different from everybody else's. Thank you. As you know, I'm very passionate about this, so bear with me when I'm trying to defend my agency. when other people come to attack us or make us look in a bad light. So I'm going to allow me just to talk less this time and have my major talk a little bit more, hopefully. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the statement of deficiencies. A lot has been said about what is going on at the detention center. We don't call it a jail, we call it a detention center. And simply we have deficiencies. That means a few things are out of place, a few things are out of order. We are not perfect. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the plan of correction actions. Then we're going to talk about supervision, staffing and safety, and depopulation of the Mecklenburg County Detention Center. I can tell you now, there has never been a letter, only a suggestion that would help us about depopulating the Mecklenburg County Detention Center. And I can tell you, I know well, and you should do too, that they will never close the Mecklenburg County Detention Center because we are the largest detention center in 2 states, and they have nowhere else to provide the space that we have. And it's unfortunate we have to come down a little bit in order to deal with our manpower. So the rumor has been that we're closing or they're forcing us to close. That is not going to happen under my watch. Okay. So we're going to talk about the inspection that was conducted. We're going to talk about this inspection report received and the presentation today, and also what we're going to do later. The inspection is nothing new. We have a biannual inspection. The only problem with this inspection is, and I said this to the person who took the inspection, that, so let me get the understanding. You are in a deer stand hunting deer, and you were told to go to Charlotte and inspect that jail now. So stop whatever you're doing and go to Charlotte and inspect that jail now, because I'm requiring you to do that. So that is the onset of how this all began, that somebody was told to go to Charlotte now and do what I asked you to do because of somebody else asked them to create this inspection that was done. And so the inspection was done only because someone asked the state to look at these certain dates, not a complete general inspection. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 dates to look at, and these are the dates that I want you to look at, and these are the dates that I want you to criticize. Not the whole inspection. These are the dates that I want you to criticize and look at. So someone from my staff provide them dates and times to say, look at these deficiencies and make that report out of that. Okay. So North Carolina does have a statute that governs these inspections and governs us. And so these are the, I guess, like for better words, rules that they have to follow. And so these are the rules that they follow, that we also follow. So imagine that during the crisis that we had and all the stuff that's going inside a pod is sometimes 54 people, a person may not go to the wall and touch the button to say that is a round that I'm making. Although they are inside the pod, they simply say, with all what's going on, I simply didn't touch a button to indicate that I was making a round. That would be a deficiency. So that's what we're going to talk about in the moving forward. And now I'll let Major DeLeon Brown present.
Good afternoon. My name is Major Sheree DeLeon Brown. I've been with the agency for 21 years, taking over Detention Center Central on December 29th, 2021. So I will be talking about MCSO's plan of correction, which is 153A-224, supervision of local confinement. Their findings were staffing shortages across the shifts at MCDC, and it led to non-compliance with meeting required staffing levels. We need to increase our staff, and we have a lot of staff on family medical leave and what we call FMLA. We also had an increase in workers' compensation claims, and due to the temporary absence of our COVID quarantine requirements, a lot of staff were out for that, as well as voluntary resignations. Our plan of action is to bolster recruitment and retention efforts, the development of helping employees leave positive, which is Operation Help, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Development of the Tactical Response Unit, which we call TRUE, and Sheriff McFadden will speak on that. And we also contracted the Strategic Security Corporation, and of course, we voluntarily started to depopulate Detention Center Central. So in that, recruitment and retention efforts, we offer a competitive starting salary of $52,530. We prepared a proposal for hiring and retention bonuses to attract staff and also retain staff. We've also been advertising across multiple platforms to attract qualified candidates. We've also done an off-cycle hiring when necessary. We've been evaluating software to streamline the recruitment and onboarding life cycle. We have modified the detention officer observation period. We have conducted stay interviews for retention, and we have implemented an MCSO peer support team. Next, we were talking about helping employees leave positive, which we call Operation Help. Operation Help was established or implemented on January 26, 2022, and it addressed the deficiencies in the mandatory overtime started on August 2nd, 2021. Operation Help provides a more structured approach to achieve adequate staffing levels through overtime. Staff are scheduled to work on their regular schedules and on opposite shifts. The outcomes of these efforts are that staffing levels across the shifts are more consistent with the post at MCDC, and we have eliminated staff working extended hours.
So we're going to talk about something that most people did not understand or did not hear, or we did not produce it in a way that for everybody to understand, that we have a unit that's called TRUE. TRUE is a special operation group of men that we have inside a detention center. They came up with the name TRUE, Tactical Response Unit. So what you see here are what we classified as shanks, or you known as shanks. How do they make shanks? Shanks come from the building material, from our molding around the door frames, around the bathroom frames, and our building is old. So not saying that we need a new building yet, but our building is old. And so because of the erosion and corrosion and everything else, they can pull pieces of metal from parts of our building to make these shanks. And this is how a shank is made. So when we talked about this, I want to make sure that we get this. When we talked about having assaults in the detention center, something has to be done. And so we did. So I went to a group of men and talked to them who had prior experience on working on a specialized team and said, could you all help me? And I gave them direct orders, and I gave them a plan of action, and these 14 to 16 men are under my direction only. They come to me directly and with one of my other chiefs, that we have nobody between us and them to supervise them, and we like, for better words, unleash this team onto the detention center. What you have not heard is since November 2nd, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office has not had a violent assault on them. No deputy has been assaulted. We had one person that had something thrown onto them, but that's the nature of the beast that we have. But with this team, they go inside the units and actually talk to the residents. We had residents to actually help us and assist us in confiscating shanks and other things inside the building. Believe it or not, you heard that the sheriff had to terminate one of his staff for bringing items in. That was the relationship that we developed with our residents that actually helped us. And to this day, they are still assisting us because we, the community or someone else may see these people as different. I see them as part of our community inside that also assists our staff because, believe it or not, they too want to live in a safe environment. So since November 2nd, we have not had an assault inside the Mecklenburg County Detention Center. And so the outcomes is we are confiscating a lot of stuff that could be used to assault people, but now the message is out. If True Team comes and steps in, it's going to be handled, and we actually are doing a very good job. And I'm very proud of them. And actually, I would invite them here today, but they're actively working. And so a lot of you all heard about the security group that we've had. Some people like it, some people don't. They have to get accustomed to our facility. We've had some issues with them, no doubt about it. We had some issues, and I think someone sent a picture out to the media. But these are the things that we have to face, and we well know that we have to face. But because we did not have the staffing at the time, and other people leave the agency to get better jobs, then we had to do something to completely support our staff who was there. So this is why we have hired this group. But we are still working towards hiring people outside to become Mecklenburg County detention officers and also Mecklenburg County deputies.
So with our depopulation efforts, in late December of 2021, MCSO voluntarily began working to reduce the average daily population, which we all know as ADP, of Detention Center Central, to a level that was more appropriately aligned with our current staffing. The MCSO has been working with the local justice system partners to reduce the ADP, and thankfully, each agency's efforts have been heard, and we thank them for working with us. On December 22nd, 2021, Sheriff McFadden reached out to the North Carolina Sheriff's Association requesting assistance from the 99 other sheriffs. The MCSO are working with the U.S. Marshals to reduce the federal contract population as well. Our challenges are a lot, but these are a few. The sheriff does not determine who is in custody and how long they will stay. As a pretrial detention facility, Detention Center Central has a revolving door of bookings and releases. In February, MCSO averaged 37 daily bookings and 39 releases. Our outcomes, Mecklenburg County Detention Center Central's overall ADP was declined by 6.4% between December 2021 and March 3rd of 2022. Between September of 2021 and February of 2022, the federal contract ADP has declined by approximately 37%, and as of March 2022, the current federal ADP dropped under 300. Also, there were 2 housing units closed, which allowed the reallocation of detention personnel. And there are currently 3 housing units closed, and every day we try to move and close units because of staffing or adequate staffing. I'm trying. There we go. All right. And with Operation Help Schedule is monitored daily and ensure that adequate personnel is covered and that all areas are covered in the facility. Time entries are reviewed and ensure consistency with the normal work schedule hours. The True Team submits a daily report, which is reviewed by the chain of command. And workloads and staffing levels throughout the agency are being monitored, and when opportunities for those personnel are reallocated to augment staffing at the Detention Center Central. Also, the MCSO classifications section is consistently monitoring the depopulation efforts. They are calling the 99 other sheriffs on a weekly basis, looking for more opportunities to move detainees into other jurisdictions, as well as working with DPS or Department of Adult Corrections. So our findings for 10A NCAC 14J.0601, which is supervision. The supervision rounds and inmate observation requirements were not meeting the consistency due to staffing constraints. Our plan of action is the time clock option, which Sheriff McFadden mentioned is the tour watch system, the button on the wall, will be utilized to ensure tours are conducted within 30 minutes. The tour will begin and end times will be recorded by our offender management system, and the officers will conduct required tours by walking around and observing residents while pressing an electronic tour button for confirmation. The periodic and review of those pod tours is necessary, and we pull those pretty frequently. Also, we review all video recordings of the pod tours, and if there is an officer who does not complete the required pod tours, then that can result into disciplinary action. There we go. So supervisory rounds and inmate observation requirements are not being met consistently due to staffing constraints. So again, our plan of action, the time clock option on the tour watch system will be utilized to ensure that a pod tour is conducted within 30 minutes. The pod tour and tour end times will be recorded on our offender management system, which we refer to as OMS, and the officers will be required to manage by walking around and observe residents while pressing all electronic tour buttons for confirmation.
So these are the last two slides that we have. And so our challenges, as you can see, is these are the same challenges that every organization has in America at this time. These are the same challenges that we face, but they are not produced on the news like we are. It's just that way. I have the privilege of representing 13 states in the union. There are four regional directors of sheriffs across America. It's only 4 of us that represent all the sheriffs in America. My region is from Florida to Vermont. So I talk to all the sheriffs from Florida to Vermont just about every week with their problems and concerns. And so I can tell you from the start of the COVID epidemic, we all had problems. And if you think that we have problems, I can send you all of the news articles that has been sent to me by other sheriffs dealing with the problems that they have. One sheriff office has to hire the cooking staff as detention officers to support their buildings. Other agencies have to bring the National Guard in to support their buildings. I know people talked about that and want that, but when we went to my staff assured me, no matter what anybody else said, we stuck it out and we stuck together. So when we're talking about low morale, I would say that the morale is much better now. Why? Because your sheriff, along with their staff, we push food carts on Sundays. We hand out stuff that needs to be handed out. I answer the phone downstairs and relieve people. We had to do whatever it took in November, December to make it work. So I can tell you now that we are a better agency because of that. We are a closer agency because of that. And I would say we're gonna still work hard. But what you have to understand is this. We did not have the luxury to work from home. We did not have the luxury to have our spouses work from home because a lot of our spouses, they're married. So imagine working inside of a building, walls 12 hours a day and going home and facing other things. We never had a break for 2.5 years. Here's what you don't hear, and I'm very proud of it. We had over 1,300 cases of COVID. 1,300 cases of COVID. Now, I think a lot of you know that because I tell you, when we have COVID and we don't have, we did not have a single death inside. And we take care of our people, and that is very stressful. But imagine the stress that we deal with every day, and imagine my staff deals with that every day and still have to go home. The simple thing that we don't think about is we're not robots. We're human too. We get tired. We get burnt out. One week I had 5 staff members to lose family members. We have staff members losing staff members today. Family today. Imagine the stress that my officer have now with the officer shooting. Imagine that same stress comes when we have someone who passes away, who died this weekend. Imagine the stress of not having the family to contact, not having the income. and not knowing how to contact that family. That is all stress, but we deal with that every day. What you also don't understand, that you may not understand, is when we talk about depopulation, it's almost impossible. But we did our best effort. Because here's what we don't understand. Last week, 350 people were released from Mecklenburg County Detention Center, just on a regular basis. But about 300 came through the back door. And as I said at a news conference, imagine this. I have a gentleman in my detention center now who has been there 10 years waiting to go to court. I have 125 men and women that they had on the news that has 2 to 4 years waiting to go to court. Not only waiting to go to court, but has never seen their family. Why? Because of COVID-19, because we are restricted. Imagine not having that. Now here's what you also need to understand when we're talking about this. Imagine that the health provider, they get tired too, and they go to another job, as my daughter did. When she got the call to go to Johns Hopkins, she left me in 14 days because it was a better job. So staff members in the medical field here leave too. Imagine getting a call on a Sunday that says the entire staff of the kitchen has walked out, but I have to feed 1,500 people 3 times a day. These are the things that you won't hear or be talked about, but think about this, and I joked about it on the way here. The calls that I get from mothers concerned about their family is inside our detention center. I get those calls personally, and I have to answer them personally, and I put that strain on my staff. So when we're talking about this, it's easy to look at it on a board, but think about what we go through that others don't go through. We've never had a break for 2.5 years, and I asked them to stay. So who I have here now in my facility are the best that you could have, because they stuck it out. They didn't give up. And that's what we deal with every day inside the detention center. So when you look at this, it's maybe not as clear as we think it is. Because when you call 99 sheriffs and they said, I can't help you, and I have no place. A sheriff jail burned this week in the mountains. He cannot place 38 people. When they called me Sunday morning, I said, I can't help you. The juvenile detention center. We have the largest juvenile detention center in the state. And we could do better if the state provides what we need. They are beating our door every day, said, we simply don't have the people to manage what we're doing. So if you look at it, we all are in this crisis. So it's just not Mecklenburg County, although they want you to think that, it is not that way. But my men and women are tired, but they still stick it out. And they will remain that way because they took an oath and they took a commitment. So we will have these problems of burnout, upset, but when they see us pushing food carts, they see us answering the phone, that give them some hope. When I know somebody's gonna have surgery, I know who that person is, that's fine. When my staff can call me and say, Sheriff McFadden, I will come to work, but I don't have a ride in the snow. I said, I will send a car for you. Well, how I'm gonna get home? I will send that car to take you home. That is the commitment that my staff has. And that's the commitment that we have. No matter what anybody says, we have been through, as my wife said, HE double hockey sticks. But we are resilient, and we will remain that way. And so when we're talking about increasing, we have an industry that doesn't, what we put out to the media makes a mother, a husband, a wife says, I don't want you to have that job. I want you to go someplace else. You can make more money working at QT gas station than you can have here. But we are competitive, and we believe that we will do better in the months to come. So we will take care of the correction actions, but let me say this. These are not enforcement actions. Let me make sure y'all have that clear. These are not enforcement actions. These are simply corrective actions. We've been down this road before. If you go across the state, and here's what I wanted to ask the inspector. Have you treated any other detention center like you have Mecklenburg County? I told him personally, I want you to live with that in your heart, because we know where it came from. Because you didn't come to do a general inspection, you come with particular days to ask us about, and that's what this report is. simply making rounds and touching a button. Simply rounds and touching the button. And that's what we go, and that is our deficiencies. Because my staff may have been tired, a lot of stuff is going around, and we simply didn't touch a wall button. Those are the deficiencies we have inside the Mecklenburg County Detention Center. Thank you.
All right, before we open it up for questions, let me take the time.
We have a presentation by Sonia Harper to talk a little bit about what she's been doing on her end. So I don't know if you want to hear that now, or do you want to do your questions
We want to hear
first?
that now, because
Okay.
I think the two will probably,
Thank you.
yes. Ms. Harper?
Right. Good afternoon, Chairman Dunlap, Commissioners, and Madam Manager. I'm going to spend a few moments this afternoon really just kind of walking you through some of the efforts that the criminal justice system partners have had underway in order to assist the Sheriff's Office in their depopulation efforts. I want to start off, though, with a little bit of background, a little bit of history as to how it is that we utilize the Mecklenburg County Jail, because when we initially received this request, we recognized that there were going to be some challenges attached to that due to the fact that there's been some very concerted efforts that have occurred here in Mecklenburg County over really the last 15 years for us to be very intentional in the manner in which we utilize our jail. And a lot of that work over the last few years has really been focused on decreasing the jail population here. So I want to start with a little bit of history and going back to 2008. And at that time, Mecklenburg County jails were in fact overcrowded. Here within the jurisdiction, between the Jail North and Jail Central facilities, the Sheriff's Office has design capacity for a little shy of 3,000 beds total. And back in 2008, we were over that capacity. We had an average pretrial daily population of a little over 1,900. We had a projection at that time that there was going to be a need for over 5,100 jail beds in Mecklenburg County. And that was also what sparked conversation about the need for a new facility. And so there were discussions about a plan for a new jail in Mecklenburg County in 2008, and the price tag of that came in at about $360 million. That really got partners here talking about, how it is that we use our jail, got us talking and asking a lot of questions about, again, how it is we utilize the facility. All right, there's going to be a trick to this here. There we go. And so just in general, we started really, again, taking a look at who was in the jail. We started asking a lot of questions about who's there. We started, asking, are these sentenced offenders that are in our jail, or are these folks that are being held pretrial? We started looking at, why are they in our jail? Were these violent offenders, or again, were these folks that had not posted bond or were there for other reasons? We were also taking a look at who we were releasing and who we were supervising. We wanted to make sure that we were using the pretrial resources that exist here within the jurisdiction as wisely as we possibly can. And we also started taking a look at bond setting practices here within Mecklenburg County. We wanted to have really kind of a better understanding as to who was receiving bond and how bonds were being imposed. So at the time, we started again, CJS, we're a data-driven department. We started digging into the numbers to get a better understanding of who was there. And what we found is that, a lot of the top 5 charges of folks that were booked into the jail there in 2009 were folks that were really not considered to be risk to public safety. And the vast majority of those that were sitting in the jail were there with under secured bonds. So, again, we saw with our driving while license revoked, we had 99% of those folks that were in custody were there for secure bonds, as well as you can see here from the others on the slide. So again, we really got to that point to where, we were really asking ourselves as to whether or not the folks that were in our jail, again, were real risk to public safety. Around this same time, the Board of County Commissioners also convened the Justice and Safety Task Force. And this was also the point in time where the county started making pretty significant investments in our state partners to ensure, like our district attorney's office, our public defender's office, our courts, had the personnel to be able to help sort of address what we were seeing in the system overall. Fast forward a little bit, and this got us to, really trying to make some shifts here within the jurisdiction, again, at taking a look at how we were making release detained decisions when we utilized the jail. And so this is around the time where we started really kind of making that shift from moving away from a charge-based system to one that was really based on risk. So again, these were really kind of driven, driven towards wanting to, to protect the public safety. We wanted to be, as objective as we possibly could in our decision-making process. We wanted also to uphold the language within the North Carolina statute that indicates that the least restrictive means should be imposed. And there was also a lot of focus on really preserving the legal and constitutional rights of the afforded defendants. So if you fast forward to where we are now, here in 2022, we're in a different place than we were in 08. So obviously, we did not build the new jail. In 2015, we saw the closure of the Work Release Center. In 2016, we saw the consolidation of the adult jail population to Jail Central, which has a bed capacity of a little over 1,900. In 2019, you saw the adoption of the revised bail policy, which made pretrial supervision an option for a greater number of individuals. And we closed fiscal year 2019 with having an average daily pretrial population in the jail of 912. So it's a 1,000 reduction than where we were in 2008. When we look at this, where we are again in 2022, I pulled, our numbers from today. The jail population as of this morning was 1,334. That's everybody who's there in the adult facility. We have been in a position here within Mecklenburg County for over a year now to where our actual pretrial supervision population is larger than the population that we currently have in custody. And so with a lot of these shifts and adjustments that we've seen over the last 15 years, and with the mechanisms that have been put into play, the partners feel very confident that we do a good job of utilizing our jail. So just a little bit on the timeline here, as we got into the depopulation conversation, December 29th, CJS, we received correspondence from the Sheriff's Office requesting assistance in reducing the inmate population at Jail Central. On January 4th, CJS and other justice system partners met with the sheriff and his executive team to hear more about their proposed efforts. On January 12th, CJS, we convened the senior resident superior court judge, the chief district court judge, the elected district attorney, and the chief public defender to discuss potential strategies to reduce the state-charged pretrial inmate population. Again, when this group, convened, there was across-the-board recognition that locally we do a good job of managing the jail. Also recognize that there were going to be some challenges in being able to, to have real significant gains and reduction based on who's currently who's currently being housed in the jail. So just to give you a little bit kind of background on the review process and what we've been doing since mid-January, the partners, we decided to really kind of build upon a process that CJS has had in place to monitor the jail population since 2018. We wanted to start here because the process that we have in place we know is one that works. We do, in fact, facilitate releases through that process. And again, we closed FY21 facilitating 769 releases through this existing jail review process. Just sort of in general, how we've been operating over the last several weeks is we are going through and identifying potential cases, defendants that are in custody. We do receive data and information from the Sheriff's Office twice weekly. We also have access to a lot of different types of jail information through our data warehouse within the department. And so we have a designated person within CJS, our jail population coordinator. That person monitors who's in the jail, why they're in the jail, how long they've been in the jail. So again, this is an existing position that we've had there. So since we've convened these partners to focus on depopulation, the group has reviewed over 6,300 charges that are attached to over 1,000 inmates. As we're going through and identifying these folks that are there, that we're kind of like, okay, maybe there's a reason you shouldn't be there. Are you really a risk for public safety? We're flagging those cases, Our CJS pretrial services team is that point of pulling the public safety assessment information, which is our risk assessment tool with here in the jurisdiction. They're also pulling the CJ leads information, which gives the criminal conviction history information. At that point, we're sending those cases on to the district attorney and public defender's office. If the defendant has a private attorney, we're sending it to that private attorney. And really to get them to look at these cases and have some conversation as to whether there may be any room to have discussion for that defendant to exit the jail in some form or fashion. So whether that is modifying the bond, whether that is pretrial supervision, could it be something like electronic monitoring? There are a variety of different ways that folks can exit the jail. So what we're asking them to do is to take a look at these cases and to see if there's any room to really kind of reach consensus to allow sort of that pathway to exit. With each case that is reviewed, those cases then, after the DA and the public defenders have the chance to review, at that point they are moving on to our judges. Felony cases are going to the Superior Court judges. Misdemeanor cases going to district court judge. At that point, if there's been consensus reached between the DA and public defender or the private attorney, at that point, if there's consensus, there is the potential for a consent order to be put into place for, again, to offer, some path, whether it's supervision or whatever the means may be. If there is not consensus reached amongst those attorneys, there is a bond conference that's held. And so there is the opportunity for both the DA and the public defender to be heard. And then at that point, the judge would make a decision as to whether to allow that person to be released, for them to remain in custody, or some other path. As we kind of dig through numbers, again, there's lots of different ways that folks exit the jail. There are also mechanisms worked into the system which, allow folks, to exit. But I mean, when we kind of went through and pulled, we can really kind of confidently say, like through this process that we've had in place since mid-January, we've been able to identify at least 48 individuals that have been able to exit the jail through these concerted efforts amongst the justice system partners. And so you can see here, there's different pathways, different ways that folks have exited. So some of those have been able to post their bonds. There were some that came to CJS for supervision. We also identified some out-of-county cases. There were instances in where cases could be disposed. So again, there's sort of a variety of different pathways. As we're continuing to work along with the sheriff's office and to identify these potential defendants, we also recognize there's some room to refine the process. And so as we're moving forward, again, we are really being very concerted in examining the practicality of the process and its ability to produce tangible results. Again, we recognize there's been a lot of work that's happened over the years. We do recognize on any given day in Mecklenburg County, over half of our jail beds do stand empty. And so again, we know that there's really kind of a very kind of small group there that could potentially be eligible for review. We, as a collective group, we are managing towards risk to public safety and failure to appear in court. We are not necessarily taking the stance to manage towards a specific number. Again, we recognize that, again, we utilize the jail. The folks that are in custody are typically there because there is, concerns about risk to public safety. So again, we are managing to that risk. We've also, moving forward, particularly with felony cases, we are prioritizing our case reviews on the felony cases to defendants who have bonds of $5,000 or less. The reason why we've landed with that number there, that $5,000 threshold, is also the focus of our bail policy leadership team. That has been the population that they have been focused on for quite some time. So we also wanted to be really consistent with the existing processes that are within the local justice system. And for those cases that are misdemeanors, we are really monitoring cases that are remaining in custody past their first appearance date. So anyone who is in custody on a misdemeanor offense and is in jail at least 7 days or more past their first appearance, we are flagging those cases to come back for additional review as we move forward. There are also a couple of other pieces of work that have been in play within the jurisdiction for a little while now, things that we've been working on to launch. But as we've kind of moved along with these depopulation efforts, we certainly recognize that there's some value that these could add to this overall effort. One of the things, as we kind of, dig through the data, we did notice sort of a trend that there are, a fair-sized bucket of individuals who are where the decision is made to detain them in custody at the magistrate's level, but when those cases go to first appearance before a judge for the first time, we do see roughly about a third of those cases oftentimes are recommended for release. And so what we want to do is to take a look at where there's opportunity to provide more information at the magistrate level at that initial appearance. And so starting next month, we will be doing sort of a soft launch of making the public safety assessment available at the magistrate's office. And then we'll have a full rollout of that follow in May of 2022. Again, this has been work that's been underway prior to, the depopulation request, and this has been work that we have had underway in partnership with the district court judges, the magistrate, and the sheriff's offices. Another piece of work that's been into play is from the district court judge's office, and this is the introduction of a finding of fact form. And the judges do intend to make this available at both the magistrate's office at the initial appearance, and then also with our district court judges at first appearance. And basically, this finding of fact form is really kind of encouraging more kind of intentional decision making in the release detain decision process, and really is kind of asking to sort of really kind of identify the factors that were tied to making that decision for a person to remain in custody or to be released. So just, again, that is sort of just, again, the high-level overview of the efforts of the justice system partners with depopulation.
All right, thank you, and certainly we appreciate the historical view of what's happening with jail reduction. And in fact, all of that started right when I first got elected in 2008, when one of the first decisions we had to vote on was whether or not we were going to build that new jail. And I will tell you that I am excited today, knowing that we didn't build that $360 million jail that would have been a burden to Mecklenburg County residents, and that we instead reduced our population now far below what the jail capacity is. Unfortunately, due to staffing situations, the sheriff is having to face this situation. So if there are questions, this is for presentation only. If there are questions, we want to give you an opportunity to ask those questions now. Commissioner Leak.
Let me first say thank you to the sheriff and your staff for your work and what you do to keep our jail in order as it ought to be. One thing I want to say to the public that I've said repeatedly, that the sheriff can arrest the chief of police, but the chief of police cannot arrest the sheriff. So that gentleman over there is the highest ranking elected official in this county. And I respect your work, sir. I respect you as an individual. And sometimes we get so involved in what we're doing that we can only see tunnel vision as it relates to our work, because we want it to be successful. And I want to thank our manager for working along with you, and not above you, but with you in the working to make it work in this community. Because if you go over to that jail, the people look like me in that jail. Greatest percentage look like me. So I want them to have the best of care under our supervision, which is non-supervision, because we cannot tell you what to do, we can't tell you how to do it, but you come to us as a county and ask for money. But I always believe if I'm giving you my money, I ought to ask you some questions and get some answers, not just you, but those who receive taxpayers' money have a right to know what's going on. So that's where I stand as a county commissioner. And again, I want to say thank you for your staff. You've got some good people, and you've had some good people, some excellent people have worked in the sheriff's department. But this is the first time we've had a man that looks like me as your sheriff. And you know, a lot of times you catch a lot of trouble when you make major decisions and think you can make them by yourself, and I don't think you feel that way. But there are those who feel that they can make decisions by themselves. None of us can make decisions by ourselves because we are an elected body to help to make those decisions. So my concern is, what do you need from the county to help you with the issues that you say you have to address? That's number one. And my second question deals with, once you receive that support, what training is in place for your staff and yourself to become better tuned to what your responsibility is? Because none of us know it all. None of us know it all. So will you answer those two questions for me, please?
Thank you so much, Commissioner Leak. You've always been a champion in my book. The county has worked with us diligently, and I must give respect to the county manager. She came to us when we asked for help. Imagine asking all the sheriffs across the state and they said they couldn't help me. Imagine asking the police chiefs that they couldn't help me. When we went to the federal judicial system, they can't help us. The U.S. Marshal did help us in depopulating the jail, as we call it, but there's a back door that also allows people to come in. So the county is working with us, and we're working on recruitment efforts, we're working on incentives, so that is what we have asked, and we think that is well on its way. Training is important. I looked at training the other day, that are we training our people well, or can we do it better? I have two young ladies now that have been working for the last year on how we train our, they're called FTOs. So we're working on that. So we're going to look at training, and we're going to look at measures that to help us deal with stress. So this is what we're doing. But you have to understand, it's funny, some of the people that I've called to help, they are no longer employed. They're under the same stress that we have because they have to deal with personal family issues. So we have to look at this holistically in a nation, and not just at Mecklenburg County. We all are facing these things. Everybody's shortage. The state is short. They can't house people. They're short even to do the inspections. So everybody's short. But to your question, that the county manager has helped us. We're on a great way, we believe, and so we appreciate that. But we will look for better training to help my staff.
And yourself.
And definitely myself. I just talked about getting some more help in how I make decisions.
Nothing is wrong with it. I don't mean to cross you, but nothing is wrong with asking for support and asking for help. I ask all the time the people I represent, what is it you need me to do and how do you want me to do it? So there's nothing wrong with that at all, sir.
We take that. We take that. But one thing I want to say, if we're in the ocean and you see that we are sinking, I shouldn't tell you to throw me a life raft. And that's the problem I have. If you see that we are in a difficult position, be a cheerleader instead of a critic. And that's all we have asked. You know, we see what's going on, but don't sit back and point at us all the time. I'm not saying anybody's doing that, but I think that we can honestly say that has happened. We all know the problems at the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. It's nationwide. We're not unique. And so when you see it, we're looking for the phone calls, or we're looking for the knock on the door. How can we help you? Believe it or not, the grassroots organizations came to help and feed and help us. So, you know, we look at those things, but we're not beyond asking. I just think that sometimes that we shouldn't have to ask. And that's what maybe I need to be mindful that we always have to ask, even when we don't think we have to ask.
And my last question is this. They used to always have a luncheon or breakfast at the restaurant across the street from the jail. Yeah. And we used to attend that. And my major thrust when I would go, and I went every time, number one, to make sure we provide an adequate salary for those who put their lives on the line, and that's the police department and the sheriff's department. I ask that we look at that budget and make sure that we provide a salary for those individuals to live in Charlotte and can take care of their families. That's number one. And number two, look after me, okay?
We
Thank
will.
you.
All right, are there other questions? Commissioner Altman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Sheriff, and thank you, Ms. Harper.
I'm going to tell you now, I'm putting a timer on.
Okay, sir, how long do I have?
You got 3 minutes.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say, you mentioned disparagement of the profession, and I just want to encourage everybody to reach out and thank all of our public safety servants, our CATS drivers, our county workers, our city workers, our teachers. These individuals make our community run, and they deserve our appreciation and our respect for the critical services that they provide to us. And I'd like to thank the people who came before us, whose vision helped to deliver a prison population, jail population, which is 1/5 of what it was predicted to be in 2020. My understanding is that it was supposed to be a little over 5,000 in 2020, and I heard you say that the number today is 1,300. So that's wonderful. I think we need to think about electing people to a state office who will ensure that we have the resources to fund our jails and to deal with our transportation infrastructure and education and all of our critical services, because, you know, we need more resources to do so. I'm concerned about the average stay of some of those individuals you mentioned. I know that's not your fault, but I'd like to have insight into why some people have been there over a year. I'd like to know if you can not take federally contracted inmates when we are short-staffed. And I'd like to know the 48 individuals who have exited the jail since Ms. Harper and her great staff have been working to find folks who are eligible, to go out on pretrial supervision or unsecured bond. Have there been any problems with those individuals being a risk to public safety or flight risk or a failure to appear? Have there been any issues with those folks who have recently become eligible under the new guidelines? And thank you.
I think that we need to take a closer look who's inside the detention center, and not to throw anything. It is more than paper. We lost this young lady this weekend, and it still bothers my heart, is because when we look at why she was there, how long has she been there, she did not receive a phone call, a lawyer never visited her, no family ever visited her, and she didn't have commissary on her books, and she was homeless. That is a person that I believe that is nonviolent. I mean, that is a person that I don't believe that had created any violence. It was a break-in and entering, and I'm curious if that break-in and entering is to look for someplace to stay. But that is something that my staff has to live with. It's a young lady who's been working several years for us, found her. She is yet to come to work. I've talked to her every day because this is a tragedy that she saw. And so these are the people that I think that we need to look at it a little bit closer than that. But there's a lot of people inside. I walk around now to look at these people.
You can finish answering. You can finish answering. I just can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that we need to look at that closer. I walk around, and my staff is going to laugh. I said something to one of my chiefs one time. Why are you upstairs? And they'll love to hear this. Why are you upstairs pushing food carts? And that's a big joke now. But now I understand why they push food carts, because it takes that. But then while I'm pushing food carts, I get a chance to talk to the residents, and why are you here? There are some people who are in there for very violent charges. And I can't say they should remain, because that's not my place. My place is just custody and care. But when you're walking around and said, you were here for 3 years on a DWI or driving while drunk, or whatever you want to call it, and a lot has destroyed that person. And we're trying to be in the form of rehabilitation and reentry, because that's what we do also, because we want these citizens to return back to society better than they're left. And so these are our struggles on top of everything that you saw today. So I think that we need to take a look at who's inside. Fine and fees is a nightmare. People are held because of fines and fees. And so they are still inside. But there are a lot of people, when we say 2 years, we have a top 10 that comes out every day. 10 years waiting to go. And so we can say that the person has a mental deficiency, but we are not a mental hospital. although your sheriff thinks that way, and that's why we have a behavioral health for men and women, and we're going to have something that the state is going to call capacity restoration, and I just got off that call this morning. So instead of transporting somebody across the state, we can take care of our people here. But these are things that we don't think about well, and the issues that we have to face. Think about the hospital trips that my staff have to take. Mm-hmm. We take people to the hospital at night. Somebody get injured, somebody has to go to the hospital and sit with them. We have people, we don't let people just sit over there that need medical care. We have hospital trips every single day that if the tooth need to be pulled, we have to take them to the dentist, and who sits there with them? If they have a medical emergency, we have to go to the hospital and sit with them, and that's just not one. So imagine that rotation there. The feds just called me this morning and said, when can you take this responsibility back? Even though that we have about 303 federal inmates, think about this, prior to pandemic, your deputies were transporting them to and from the hospital, sitting with them to and from the medical facilities. That's what your sheriff's deputies have been doing. And they're asking us now, can we continue to do, can we continue to do that? Because we give it to them because they're short of staff. So it's much more than what we have seen. Being educated by what happens at the sheriff's office is very important, and it would be an eye-opening experience.
All right, so Mr. Sheriff, we're going to ask for more brevity from you as well. All right, Commissioner Cotham.
I guess I'll talk fast. Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate all that you do. And one thing that when you ran for office, certainly I knew who you were, but I admired your creativity before you became sheriff. And I know that's something that you're able to use. And I think the idea of pushing the carts and being out there is an example. And I was concerned when you talked about no breaks. Your people don't have breaks. And I hope that you can look at that again because, people do need to have a break I think that's what you said.
Some of this is old news. And some of this is things that people still talking about.
Okay, well, is it because I'm on a short time length here? Is it true or not? Do you? It
was true back in November. Because of what Major De Leon said about help, they do get breaks now.
Oh, they do get breaks
yes.
now. Okay, so I think that's great. I do think that, and I guess it's hard for me to not put on my recruiter hat because I have done recruiting for more decades than I'd like to remember, but this is a very unusual time. This is the craziest hiring market ever for everybody, not just for jails, but for organizations. And I do recruiting now for several companies, and I've had to, companies that recruit the same way they did in 2000 or 2010 or 1985 are having trouble, but because it's very different now, and I do hope that sometime we can chat about that. I did mention that to you about some other things that you might try to help you build your staff, and at the same time you have to work on keeping your staff because if you hire someone, you don't want someone to leave. Also, so and I think in the long run it'll build your staff and their loyalty more if they're not treated, because I think some of them feel like they're treated like numbers in any organization, not just in yours. And I think but there are things you can do, and I think because you are a creative leader, you would have a real edge in making things happen. So I'm very optimistic that you could do some things like that. I don't know how much time I have, but I do have a question for Ms. Harper. So is she still here? Okay. Sonia, when you were speaking, and I thank you for all that you do, and I know it's very valuable, all the things you do, but the whole time you spoke, I didn't hear any mention of the victims of the crimes. And I am someone who's, I
think I got you where you're going with that. So part of this process is also when we're going through and taking a look at the cases that are there, in those instances where there are victims attached to a case, that is part of the discussion between the DA and the Public Defender's Office. We also recognize that in instances where there are victims attached to cases, the Marsy's Law statute in North Carolina does have criteria for victim notifications. So in instances where a case may be flagged and there may be some conversation about that person potentially exiting, exiting the jail, that is part of that process, is for that victim to receive notification. That victim's, their information, their position on that is part of what's considered in that process. So again, we're flagging cases and identifying cases, but not all those cases are exiting. There are folks that will remain in custody.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. I actually do have questions, but I'm happy to email you if that's okay with you, and you can respond that way. Both of you, if that's okay. Also, I just want to say thank you for your honesty, Sheriff. I know you are under stress, and everybody gets into their own little world, and we don't think about others, and you're dealing with a special kind of stress. So thank you for everything, and thank you for the historical data. That was very helpful, and that's all. Thanks.
Commissioner Powell.
My first question is, Sonia, if you could just talk about who is on the group that is making these decisions.
So as I indicated earlier on, we convened the senior resident superior court judge, the chief district court judge, and then also the DA and the public defender. So that is the makeup of our work group. Our district attorney and public defender's office, they have designated attorneys within their office that are really kind of the more active, I don't want to say more active, but they're the ones who are actually doing the reviews of the cases that we're sending on, but that is the makeup of the work group.
Because there is a concern in Mecklenburg County, people want to live in a safe place. And so what is the impact, and maybe Sheriff McFadden can answer this, what is the impact budget-wise and depopulation-wise of reducing the federal contract population? How does that impact your budget?
Rachel?
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello.
So this year we're projecting that because the population has declined, and keep in mind, the population was declining last July. The efforts that they've made so far since December, when the sheriff convened a meeting with the acting U.S. Marshal, is roughly about 112 residents or federal residents. The impact to the fiscal year budget in 2022, we're estimating is going to be approximately $10 million. For FY 2023, that we just submitted our budget yesterday, it's closer to about $13 to $14 million. That's based on the current average population of about 300. If we eliminate that population altogether, the overall impact would be $31 million to our revenue budget. They are charged $160 a day to be housed. And keep in mind, going back to 2008, we had a very robust federal population of about 750. Last year around this time, we were housing about 544. We had 303 today.
So as we're reducing this federal contract population, where are they housed?
Most of them are being sent to Irwin County in Georgia. A lot of them have already been sentenced, and they were waiting on beds at Bureau of Prisons. Bureau of Prisons is having a struggle as well getting staffing, so lots of times they stay in our facility. They have sent some to adjoining counties. I think Caldwell, maybe Iredell have taken some of the federal population. They try to keep them in the Western District. But we've done probably 2 transports to Irwin County, and I think we've done 1 to Raleigh.
So really, the bottom line is this means there's a revenue loss of $13 to $14 million.
Well, that's if we house 300 per day. The impact in FY 2023, if we eliminate that population altogether, is $31 million.
Okay. And I too want to thank everyone. Thank you for your work. COVID has been grueling, and thank you for sharing the experiences that you've been through and for pulling together. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jarrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, I want to say thank you to you and your team for being here. Thank you for certainly providing the visibility that you have. One of my main concerns, as you were going through your presentation, is around the stress that you and your team are experiencing. And I don't want us to walk away from the conversation feeling completely helpless. But candidly, I feel that way, and I'd like to get some indication from you on or around actions that this board can take, this community can take, to really support the deputies. As we have this conversation going on right now, you've got deputies across the street working and in other spaces and places that I'm sure feel really disconnected. And I think we've got to really get some tangible, concrete items or actions that we can take so that those folks feel supported, and we'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Garrett. That is a perfect segue into what I was going to say. When I listened to you, I said, what you going to do? We only use the word you when we are losing something. What are you going to do? But when we are winning, it's we winning. Think about that. The problem is mine, but it is actually the cities. It's just the counties. And so I think that you have to be mindful of how you approach this. We all know police, this is a joke that I said, no homeless people need to be fed Thanksgiving and Christmas because everybody feeds them. Think about it. Everybody feeds the homeless Thanksgiving and Christmas because they believe that's what they should be doing. What about thanking us all the time, whether it's good or bad? Everybody wants to deal with the officer being shot. That's a thank you moment, and we are thinking about you. But why don't you think about us year round? And that's what we are asking them to do. Support us year round, not seasonal, because it shouldn't be seasonal, and that's what we do often. When it's National Police Week, we thank everybody, we say everything, but what about supporting us from the beginning? And that's when I think when the question comes, if you see that us under stress, and you see that we may be drowning, and somebody is talking about your sheriff's office or your sheriff, we're looking for our people to defend us. And that's what we can ask. And we're asking the community to help look at how we can reduce the interaction with law enforcement that is so questionable that it becomes probable cause and they come to jail or the detention center. So these are the things that we all can do, but when it's bad, it is you. Because here's what I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to give you a secret. What the Department of what the state did is a 1 hour or 2 hour inspection. You're going to be proud of your sheriff and your sheriff's office at the end of this month and the beginning of next month, because we're going to receive the Triple Crown Award. And we're going to receive it because it took us 2 years to receive it. That is the highest accreditation. We'll have all 3 accreditation nationwide that you can receive as a sheriff's office. There may be 2 in North Carolina, maybe 2. I only know 1 other sheriff's office in the state that has it. When he knew that I was going to receive this award, he called me. He said, Sheriff, it took us 5 years to receive that accreditation. And if you don't believe it, for food for thought, call Wilmington and actually speak to the sheriff. He said, it took us 5 years. How did you do it in 2? Because we put our hands to the plow and not listen to the critics. So if you say, what can we do? Support your sheriff's office when others don't. Be a cheerleader instead of crickets or critics.
That it? All right, Sheriff, I got a couple of questions. First of all, and we go back to this reduction. Have we had conversation with the chief of police about potentially issuing more citations and fewer arrests for misdemeanor offenses?
Although I'm the chief law enforcement officer in the county, I can't tell the chief what to do. When we had the call, the chief called me and said, you having these conversations, because we had a conversation with everyone. Everybody in the city, everybody in the county, and everybody in the federal government. Here's our hand to help. Here's the common thing. Well, let me know if you need our help. Well, that's why we wrote you the letter. We told them to give it some thought and be creative to see how you can help us. We've only had one phone call. We haven't had a phone call after that. So we give them what we are dealing with, but they're going to have to make those decisions themselves.
All right. I want to give you a minute or two to talk about your application for ABLE.
About the CALEA? CALEA is one of the highest things that you can receive in law enforcement. We had it when I was with CMPD, and the CALEA president approached me when I was at a conference. He says, why don't you have CALEA? And CALEA they come inside your agency, and I mean, they rip your agency apart. They look at everything that you're doing. You rewrite your policies and procedures. And so I assigned one person to do that. And that is all that person was doing for 2 years. So receiving CALEA with all of the other 2 awards will give us what they call the Triple Crown. And that's an honor, because not only that they come into your house, they inspect everything that you do and not just come for an hour. So it peeled back the onion to see what we weren't doing, and we had to write a lot of policies over, change policies that was outdated, change policies and procedures and all. And we also, with the ACA, you know, when we look at them, they came in and look at what we were doing, and they spend days instead of a week, instead of an hour or 2. So we are very proud of CALEA, and we should receive that award on the last Friday of the month, Saturday of the month.
All right, well, ABLE is the new one that you're applying for.
Yes, sir.
And that's the one that I just had to write the letter of support for.
Yes.
And I wanted to share that because I wanted the community to know that the Sheriff's Department, among all of the other agencies in law enforcement, is really trying to make sure that they don't cause harm to citizens. And this is a certification that teaches officers how to deal with situations that they don't anticipate and that they don't expect, which is typically when things happen that cause harm to other people. But I really appreciate the fact that you decided to pursue that, and I thought the community should know that. Let me just say before we end this is that I want to thank you for your candor. I want to thank you for being accessible. I want to thank you for being available. I want to thank you for being responsive. Now, people don't know that the sheriff and I talk on a regular basis, it's about, as he suggested, offering support when the hellhounds are on your track. My pastor once told me, he said, I don't need you when I'm right. I need you when I'm wrong. And so in this situation, our Sheriff's Department is facing criticism, and I could tell you more about this than I really want to get into, about how this whole inspection thing came about because of a report from somebody, and this has a lot to do with the politics that we see in our community today with these people challenging the sheriff. But be that as it may, I thank you, and Commissioner Leak asked the question. So now we've asked you, what more can we do? And if there is a need, we'd like to know. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. We will move to our second item on the agenda, which is discussion of eligible candidates for temporary at-large county commission seat. And so one of the things I wanted to clarify, because I had a couple of calls from some of my fellow commissioners about the fact that you had to have 7 people. I want to make it clear. You can nominate up to 7, but you don't have to nominate 7. In other words, the maximum number of people that we've identified that we can interview on Saturday is 7. But if we don't have to interview 7, we don't need to do that. The other thing I will tell you is, and I've said this before, sometimes you, and I've seen one person nominate 3 people when you can only vote for 1. You're pitting your other opponents against the one that you really like, or the one that you really want. So I want you to keep that in mind in terms of your nominations. So our clerk has the tally sheet. Our clerk will keep the tally as to who is being nominated. And what I'm going to do is the same process that we've always done. We're going to go down the list of nominees, and then we're going to see how many people vote for that person. In order to proceed, of course, you've got to have a minimum of 5 votes. Commissioner Lee.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
All right.
When you say that we can nominate up to 7 people, when did we decide that you could or could not, this board, for information?
Okay, well, I set forth the process. And
Who did now? Who did?
I did. I did.
Not alone, I hope.
Commissioner Lee, I'm telling you what the process is. Now, the bottom line is, we've always used this process.
We haven't done this before.
But it's the same process.
I don't want you to get upset,
Okay,
sir.
well, I want you to understand.
I'm only asking the question for the community and for myself. When did we, not you, we as a board made this decision?
Okay, we've already accepted the process, have we not?
No.
Okay, well, aside from that, we've accepted the process, and so because there are 7 people who can be nominated, each person will get up to 7 votes. All right, and again, we'll start with the first person. Yes.
I just wondered if you would allow some commentary of what people are, because I like to listen to what people are thinking, but, you know, like what they were looking for, but.
That's right.
I didn't know, I thought we would be doing that.
Okay, so we are saving that for the next round because we're going to be doing a whole bunch of stuff about people that nobody's interested in interviewing. And so it makes more sense when you get to the round where you're having to decide to have that discussion. All right.
So do I have my hand up, Mr. Dunlap?
I know you do, but you've asked several questions too, so what is it?
I asked one question.
Okay, so what's it?
The question I'm having for this community and for myself as it relates to how we're going to do this as a body. You're asking 8 people to make a decision of what you have decided and what we're going to do and do it right. We have not done this before. And replacing a site. Don't get excited. All I'm asking you is to help us to do it the right way so we won't get any traction later on down the line, sir.
Okay, and I appreciate that, Commissioner Lee. And so in the past, when we have had vacancies, excuse me, Commissioner Lee, in the past when we've had vacancies, based on the number of vacancies, it dictates how many nominations we can have. And so I've already told you.
We haven't done this before.
Okay, we haven't done this before. So we're moving forward. All right. The first name on the list is Vonnie Brown. And make sure you raise your hand if you're nominating this person so that the clerk can make note of who's nominating this person.
Chair Dunlap.
You are all, everyone that is in favor of the person, not just one.
Okay, so let me tell you what I assumed. I assumed that each one of you came in here with the list of people that you're nominating.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
No.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me
No.
1 second. The clarification, you're exactly right. The clarification is since we're going to have multiple rounds, if one person is already nominating, I mean, are we looking for the maximum of votes? That's all I'm saying.
Everybody who has
That
Vonnie
person.
Brown on
Got
their
it.
list will vote for
Gotcha.
Vonnie Brown.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right?
There we go.
All right, so can we do it again?
So
Let's just do it again.
at the end, you'll see what's going on.
It's not a problem, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify.
All right.
Thank you.
So starting again, if you are nominating Vonnie Brown, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. All right. Again, moving to number 2, if you're nominating Jackson Dumas, please raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. All right. If you are nominating Beverly Earl, please raise your hand so the clerk can record your vote. Done? All right. If you are nominating Maydeen Fells, raise your hand so the clerk can record your vote. If you are nominating Jessica Foster, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you are nominating Stephen Jones, raise your hand so the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Irene Kalika, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Terry Lansdale, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. That's 4. All right. If you're nominating Mary McCray, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. All right. If you're nominating Michael McIntosh, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. All right. If you're nominating Ayanna Perry, that's not the one. Ayanna Perry, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Wilhelmina Rembert, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. All right. If you're nominating Marlon Smith, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Jason Sorrells, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Sam Spencer, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Judy Taylor, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. If you're nominating Yvette Townsend, raise your hand so that the clerk can record your vote. All right, Madam Clerk, that is the roll. I need the names of those people who received 5 votes or more.
Beverly Earl, Mary McCray, Wilhelmina Rembrandt, and Jason Sorrells.
Sam.
What was the
I
last?
only got 1 vote.
Sam
Spencer.
It's Sam
Oh, I'm
Spencer.
sorry, sorry about that. Who got 1 vote?
So Sam Spencer is the other person.
Sorry, Sam Spencer.
All
I
right,
jumped
thank
down.
you. All right, so now, on Saturday morning, you have 4 people to interview. We start at 8 o'clock, is it?
That's correct.
All right, and so I would encourage you to be on time. There will be a different set of questions for us to ask at that time, and then you can use whatever other information you have to assess those candidates. So, is there, yes,
When will we get those questions?
we won't get them.
We are sending them out the day before, so you'll get them Friday morning before noon.
Okay, and just
We're
to be
also
clear.
setting them to the candidates as well, because they'll have them in advance, so.
Okay. So can we, like, sometimes when we have interviews, if we decide to ask a question that's off the script, we have to make sure we ask every single person the same question.
Thank you for that.
Do we have that opportunity at this time, or do we only get
That's
to
not
ask?
part of our process at this time, so it's
Well-
not, because it's really hard to
Decision.
keep track of that. But if you want to change the process, you can, but it's not part of the process as
We
we
can't
have it
change it
currently.
now, we haven't changed the other.
Well, hold up. So, did we determine how much time is allotted for each candidate?
We had an hour, so that, because we thought we were going to have 7 candidates.
Okay, so there's no need to change that part of it, 7 candidates. But I think it's fair, and we've done this before. If you ask a question of one candidate, you must ask every candidate the same question.
So if a third candidate comes in, you can't ask them a question because number one and number two already left.
Correct.
So you need to decide at the beginning that you're going to add questions. You can't just decide in the middle of your process, in the middle of the day.
So is everybody being interviewed at the same time?
No, but if you interview 1, 2, 3, 4, when candidate 3 comes in, you cannot pose a question at that time that you didn't ask candidates 1 and 2.
I got
So
you.
if there's a different questions you want to ask, you need to decide that in the morning before we start interviewing at 8 o'clock.
Thank you. Again, at the beginning of the process, if you don't ask the question of candidate 1, you can't ask it of 2, 3, and 4.
So what if it's a
If
follow-up?
you ask candidate 1, you can't ask it.
No, if you ask candidate 1, you could ask all the other candidates the same question.
Thank you.
But if you don't ask candidate 1, you can't ask that question of any of the other candidates. That's
What if you
fair.
asked it of candidate 2? One pass and not ask, but candidate 2.
You can't ask candidate 2.
But you haven't questioned candidate 2 yet. So
Commissioner
what we do
Lee?
to 1, we follow all the way through.
Yes, ma'am. All right, Commissioner Copeland.
Dina, in what you just said, is that something that, I never heard that before. Is that something that is in some statute or something?
Well,
or-
it's just in HR, we want to make sure that the process is fair and clean. And so we don't want it to be where anybody, it doesn't have to be in this process, where an interviewer is trying to solicit information from one candidate that they're not soliciting from others to make that candidate either look more favorable or less favorable to the entire board. So we want to make sure, and this is an open process, the media will be watching, the public will be watching, and we want to make sure that every candidate is treated the same.
This is our plan.
Okay, I guess I was just thinking if, in this day of technology, we could easily ask a question of someone, before, that maybe we failed to ask, by texting them and asking them to respond. But I see where you're coming from. I just didn't know. So the HR leaders helped with that?
Well, that's how we do all of our interviews in the county, because we do all of our interviews in a panel style. So that is, we
okay.
have predetermined questions, and we make sure that we
Yeah.
ask the same questions to every candidate.
Yes. It's just that sometimes I know when I have been on development issues, a lot of times they already had answered the question in their presentation, and then I had the question, and so I felt like I really wasn't getting a chance to ask the question.
Well, in this case, there aren't going to be any presentations, so it's just going to be you asking questions of the candidates.
Okay, I guess I understand. I guess I just thought it would be more of us asking the questions, but
All right.
that's fine.
Okay,
But you don't want any of your candidates also to accuse you of treating them differently and not getting a fair opportunity to present information to the board. So it's to protect you as well as it is to protect
Yeah.
the candidates.
And hear you, Dina. What did you say?
I wish,
Said it's designed to make sure that we protect you as well as protect the candidates, because you don't want a candidate to accuse you of not giving them the same opportunity that every other candidate got in the interview process.
that's true, and that's why I was concerned where we weren't able to say, today before we voted, what we were, what we were looking for and why we voted that way. So, because we don't want to hurt feelings, but we're going to have some. So, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Powell.
So to alleviate all of this, unless the questions have been predetermined, if everyone has a question, I think we could just send it to the clerk and the county manager and the attorney. Just send your questions so that we ask it to every candidate.
I think they've already got it done, don't you?
Not the manager.
Well, we have the questions done, and we're going to be sending them out on Friday morning. So if you review the questions and there's additional questions you want to ask, if you send them to the clerk and to me and the attorney, we'll look at them and we can incorporate them into the question sheets that we're putting together. Does that work for you guys?
So let me just remind everybody, I mean, I don't know why we're trying to make this process any different. You have the right to engage with all of the candidates prior to Saturday. You can talk to any one of them. In fact, I know some have reached out to you. So ask them those questions. All right.
Some I haven't heard from.
So I appreciate that, Chairman, but we want this to be very public. And so I don't like having telephone calls, like personally. But I think the public deserves to hear what the questions are.
And they will if you ask them.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just remember, you got to ask everybody the same question. All right. Any other questions? All right. Commissioners' reports, up to 3 minutes. We'll start with you, Commissioner Durrell. All right.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
I thought we'd hear about the trip to Austin.
Commissioner Cotham.
Okay. No report, thank you.
How much did it cost?
Commissioner Powell.
No report.
Commissioner Leak.
How much did it cost each individual to go to Austin, Texas? And do
It
we have a
cost
report? And do we have a report?
It cost $1,900 per person plus airfare.
Well, what was airfare?
I don't remember. I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't remember what my airfare was.
And I'm asking because it's public information.
Of course it is. I'm not.
Thank you. What did we gain by sending these people to Austin, Texas?
Well, you have your colleagues here. Do you want to report out?
They're not saying anything. I said it.
Is it my?
Commissioner Maya.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about, I'm happy to answer your question.
I shouldn't have to ask you, you should tell me.
Okay, so we learned about Austin.
Excuse me, let me just remind you, these are your 3 minutes. You can say what you want to.
Well, I wasn't going to have a report.
Okay.
And spend my money?
All right.
I'm not going to have a report, thank you.
All right, Commissioner McDowell.
I'm not going to have a report either.
All right, the chair has no report. Having completed the agenda, chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and properly seconded. Any unreadiness? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, so carries the motion.
Spend our money.
A couple of questions about that slide, that last one.
Yes, sir.
Can we bring that back up, the preceding? And those are pedestrian crossings. Yes.
Sidewalk.
The one that has thoroughfares without sidewalk, that title.
So it's two back. Yes.
There. So you said that we have 11 miles that will be paid for as a result of bonds that are already authorized.
Yes, sir.
Right? And the 5 miles right now is scheduled for the next bond cycle.
Yes, sir.
And in that, we have $50 million total for pedestrian. So can we assume that there's more that will actually get done in that bond cycle than these 5 miles?
Possibly. So let me describe this a little bit differently. So what's shown in green and reflected in the 11 miles is in some stage of planning, design, or construction.